Well, I'll start out with my next project. This is a Kenwood KA5500 integrated amplifier. I picked it up for next to nothing about 1.5 years ago, and it's been sitting on the shelf, and I'd like to see if I can get this thing straightened out so I can actually use it out in the garage for when we have company and when we're out there working or doing other things. I'd like to have some sound up in the garage, and I think this would work perfectly for that purpose. But first it's going to need some work. So first thing I'm going to do is do a functional test, just kind of to see what's wrong with it, and then go from there. Alright, I got the computer hooked up to it. Let's give it a quick test. Well, it seems to be the main issue is really dirty switches. Really dirty switches. Everything is dirty and cutting out. There's supposed to be a bulb here too, and if I look up in there, I see light, but not lighting up this display very much either. That and everything's falling apart. This glue is done, and it just all comes right off. All these knobs are just barely hanging on by a thread. Actually, those ones are solid, but the attenuator and the power are barely hanging on. A lot of crackling. Alright, I'm going to open this thing up, see how easy it's going to be to clean it. Power off. As you can see, I've already dove in head first into taking the faceplate apart and everything else. So, got all the inner faceplate off, and I got this front circuit board exposed, which should give me some access to the controls, and I can actually go ahead and clean most of these. So that's nice. I'll get to work on that. And just have to look at some of this. This is not a complicated circuit in the slightest. It's got 2 op amps there, handful of capacitors, maybe 8 or 10. The controls. There's really not much to this amp. There's your selector switch up there. This mono switch in stereo, which doesn't work. Low pass, which I don't know if it works. Not much to it at all. And all the switches need to be cleaned regardless, so that's what I'll be doing next. Well, I've got all the switches and pots cleaned out as best I could with deoxit Fairlube on the pots and deoxit clean out the switches. And I was really looking at this board, and I decided that it's going to be so trivial to recap it that I think I'm just going to go ahead and do so. I've got 4 1 microfarad low leakage 50 volt. I've got 2 3.3 microfarad low leakage 50 volt, which I have both of those. 2 1 microfarad regulars, and a what is this, 10 volt 47 microfarad. I got those regulars, and 220 microfarad 25 volts. I'm gonna have to check on those. I'm not sure if I've got those. So if I've got those, that's all that's on this board. That's it. And it's pretty hard to access, so you gotta take the whole faceplate apart and everything. So I think while I'm in here, I'm gonna go ahead and take care of this. So I've got it, faceplate mostly put back together. And The next thing I'm working on is this board here. This is the what I will refer to as the power supply board. You've obviously got your mains filter caps here. You see I've done some cleaning here as well. There's a little bit of marks on here, but overall this shined up pretty well. But this board regulates some of the power that's used, for example, in the preamp and other things. You got two 470 microfarad 35 volt, and you've got another one down here that I can't see what it is yet, and the service manual isn't clear, so I'm just going to take the board out and look at it and see what it is. And you've got a regulator under here with a heat sink, although I checked this, it doesn't even get warm under normal operation, so I think they just kind of overbuilt this. Like a lot of other Kenwood stuff of the day, they did a really good job overbuilding it, and thus I'm sure this regulator is in perfect condition and has not suffered any heat damage or any other problems. So either way, I'm going to change these three caps on this board and clean the board up a little bit, and possibly change the fuse. I'm starting to put the front back together, and I've taken one of my LED wedge bulbs and stuck it in there. I measured the voltage off the power supply and I was getting a full 8.2 volts, but for some reason that bulb just was putting out no light whatsoever, and decided to bring it in the 21st century and go with an LED in there. I'll show you the difference when I turn it off here. Here it is, off. So looks pretty good. Not gonna complain. But time to get to cleaning this faceplate, I think. I don't know, I might wait till later. It's pretty nasty though. But that looks cool, so that's nice. I'm gonna have to calibrate the power meters. I noticed for some reason, even when I switch to mono, the right meter is dancing higher than the left. So I'll have to calibrate those. I'm sure there's a procedure, inject X signal at X volume or whatever, so I'll have to do that. Well, I've got the amp board out and the whole thing turned around underneath, trying to get some space to work on it. And I've run across some caps that I don't have, like 100 microfarad 16 volt bipolar electrolytic, some other things that I need. So I think I'm going to have to put this project on hold for a little while and develop a parts order here at some point to get the rest of the pieces I need. But overall things are going well. Got a few caps already replaced on here and moving along with other things, so that's where we're at the moment. Well, I finally got that one bipolar cap in with my Mouser order. I was kind of waiting on this unit. It was all I needed was this one, this little blue one back here. But I got that in, so I'm putting it all back together. And got to remember to attach this grounding thing. But yeah, it's all coming back together. So I'll be able to test that thing out here shortly, probably tonight, if I can get all the screws together and get it put back together. So well, I'm just finishing up this Kenwood, putting back together. As you can see, there's a lot of dings and scratches on it, and it's not a very pretty amp, but it should serve fairly well somewhere, and at least now I know that the thing's working right. And I have to say, out of this whole thing, the biggest problem was actually this tone defeat switch. It was a huge pain in the butt trying to get that cleaned out and actually working right. I've glued all these little switch caps with super glue since they were glued, but the glue over 30 years has disintegrated, so I'm not touching those. I'm just leaving those where they are. Just got to finish putting the knobs on. I mean, it's actually not that bad. There's some dings on it, but it's not in too bad a shape. to be real honest. So they made them a lot tougher back then. And let me get this finished putting all the knobs, cleaning them up and putting the knobs back on. Just checking the DC offset. I'm on millivolts, and clearly 5.4 millivolts is very good. There is no adjustment on this amp, believe it or not, for DC offset. This one seems to be around 11. There's no adjustment, and honestly that's pretty good considering there is no adjustment. So I'm going to leave it that way. That's good. Don't have to worry about any DC at the speakers. This is a sweet little amp, I'll tell you what. It's got a cool muting feature too for when you're changing records. It's not silent, but it gives it a -20 dB cut. So that's neat. I don't want to mess with these knobs too much because the glue is still drying. I forgot to put these. Now, it's an interesting feature on these Kenwood amps. When they say A plus B on the speakers, it actually puts them in series with each other as a 16 ohm load, or if you have two 4 ohm sets, you'd get an 8 ohm load, which is nice if you want to try and run 4 ohm speakers. You could do them that way, and the amplifier would see 8 ohms, which is going to be a little bit nicer for it. But at the same time, if you're just running one of the sets, it's only seeing 4 ohms. I believe there is a warning on there about you need to have at least 8 ohms or something on the back. I'd have to look at the back of it. But man, this is a sweet little amp, and turned out really nicely. I cleaned up all the knobs as best I could. Some of them were kind of scratched, but I cleaned them as best I could. And I gotta say, man, to pull one of these out of the box, I'm sure back in the day I obviously never was able to, but to pull something like this out of the box, you've probably saved for months or even a year for it, and see all the fantastic shining metal and the big meters and everything lit up. Had to be really neat. So you don't get that feeling sometimes pulling some of today's stuff out of the box, although a big LCD TV, you pull it up in HD or 4K or something, does look pretty nice too. But just the quality of construction here with the polished metal and everything is definitely very neat to look at. So anyway, there's that Kenwood amp, and it's done and looking good.